Two men shaped modern psychology, mentor and student, colleagues, friends. They explored the hidden parts of the human mind together, the darkness beneath consciousness, the forces we refuse to acknowledge, the truths we bury. For years they were inseparable, then they destroyed each other, not with violence, with ideas, because they couldn't agree on one fundamental question. What is the darkness inside us? Sigmund Freud said, repressed instinct, forbidden desire, the animal we pretend we're not. Carl-Jung said, rejected meaning, the shadow self, the gods we've forgotten. Both were right, both were wrong, and their war, philosophical, bitter, personal, still defines how we understand the darkest parts of ourselves. Vienna, early 1900s. Sigmund Freud was already famous, the father of psychoanalysis, the man who dared to say that civilization was built on repression, that beneath our polite exteriors, we were seething masses of sexual and aggressive drives barely held in check by social conditioning. Freud's world was deterministic, biological, dark. He believed humans were fundamentally driven by the id, the primal unconscious part of the psyche demanding immediate gratification. Sex, aggression, survival. The id doesn't care about morality. It wants, and it wants now. But society can't function if everyone acts on every impulse. So we develop the superego, the internalized voice of social rules, morality, and shame. The superego suppresses the id, tells it no, buries desires that civilization deems unacceptable, and caught between them, the ego, the conscious self, trying to mediate between animal instinct and social expectation, trying to find acceptable outlets for unacceptable urges. But repression has a cost. The desires don't disappear. They hide, fester, emerge as neurosis, anxiety, dreams, slips of the tongue, symptoms. Freud believed that to understand the human mind, you had to excavate the repressed material, bring the unconscious drives into consciousness, face what you've been hiding from yourself. The darkness for Freud was biological, unavoidable, the price of being human in a civilized world. Then came Jung. Carl Jung was younger, brilliant, a Swiss psychiatrist who read Freud's work and saw something revolutionary. He reached out. They began corresponding, meeting, collaborating. Freud saw potential, a successor, someone to carry his ideas forward. For a while it worked. Jung defended psychoanalysis, expanded its reach, became Freud's chosen heir. But Jung was asking different questions. He worked with patients whose problems didn't fit Freud's sexual framework. Psychotic patients, people experiencing religious visions, individuals haunted by symbols and myths that seemed older than personal experience. Jung started wondering, what if the unconscious isn't just repressed personal material? What if there's something deeper, something collective? He proposed the collective unconscious, a layer of the psyche shared by all humans, containing universal patterns and symbols he called archetypes. The hero, the mother, the trickster, the shadow. These weren't learned. They were inherited, structures of meaning built into the human psyche across cultures and time. For Jung, the darkness wasn't just repressed sexuality. It was the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject because they don't fit our self-image. Not just forbidden desires, but rejected qualities. Strength we deny, creativity we suppress, potential we refuse. And beyond the personal shadow, the collective shadow. The ancient mythic forces humans have always projected onto gods, demons, and monsters. Jung believed that healing didn't come from just acknowledging repressed instincts. It came from integrating the shadow, reclaiming rejected parts of yourself, finding meaning in suffering. The darkness for Jung was spiritual, a call to wholeness. Freud was not pleased. At first he tolerated Jung's explorations, but as Jung moved further into mysticism, mythology, and spirituality, Freud saw betrayal. He wrote to Jung, "I think we should hold to sexuality as the foundation." Jung wrote back, "I cannot base psychology on sexual theory alone." The rift widened. Freud accused Jung of abandoning science for mysticism, of regressing into religious thinking, of betraying psychoanalysis. Jung accused Freud of reducing everything to biology, of ignoring the soul, of being dogmatic and authoritarian. Their letters became colder, more hostile, personal insults disguised as theoretical disagreements. In 1913, they severed contact, never spoke again. Two men who once shared everything, now enemies. Each convinced the other had fundamentally misunderstood the human mind. So who was right? Freud said the darkness is instinct. Jung said it's meaning. Freud said we repress what civilization forbids. Jung said we reject what we fail to understand. Freud looked down into biology, evolution, survival drives. Jung looked across into culture, myth, the patterns that repeat throughout human history. Modern neuroscience gives Freud some credit. We do have ancient brain structures, limbic system, amygdala, that govern survival drives, aggression, sexuality. These systems operate below conscious awareness and can hijack rational thought. Repression is real. Trauma does get buried. Unconscious drives do influence behavior. But Freud's insistence that everything reduces to sexuality, that's been largely abandoned. Human motivation is far more complex. And Jung? Modern psychology has embraced much of his thinking, even if it doesn't always credit him. The idea that humans need meaning, not just pleasure. That suffering requires narrative, not just symptom relief. That archetypes appear cross-culturally in stories, dreams, and religious symbolism. Positive psychology, narrative therapy, meaning-centered approaches, all draw from Jungian ideas, whether explicitly or not. Even the shadow concept has been validated. Research shows that people project their rejected traits onto others. That integration of disowned qualities improves mental health. That self-acceptance requires acknowledging parts of yourself you'd rather deny. So both were right, and both were incomplete. Freud understood the biological roots of darkness, the animal we carry, the drives that don't disappear just because we call ourselves civilized. Jung understood the existential dimension, the need for purpose, the darkness that comes not from forbidden desire, but from rejected potential. Their split still echoes. When you see the dark parts of yourself, the anger, the jealousy, the destructive impulses, are you seeing repressed instinct or rejected shadow? When you struggle with meaning, with feeling lost or empty, is that just sublimated sexual energy? Or is it a spiritual crisis? The answer is both. You are biological, driven by survival, reproduction, status. Freud was right about that. But you're also symbolic. You need stories, purpose, connection to something beyond yourself. Jung was right about that. The darkness inside you isn't one thing. It's instinct and meaning intertwined. Sometimes you're angry because you're repressing aggression that has nowhere to go. That's Freud. Sometimes you're angry because you've abandoned a part of yourself that demands expression. That's Jung. Sometimes you're anxious because you're avoiding a forbidden desire. That's Freud. Sometimes you're anxious because you're living without purpose. That's Jung. The mistake is choosing one lens and ignoring the other. Freud without Jung becomes reductionist. Everything is biology. Everything is pathology. There's no room for growth, meaning, or transcendence. Jung without Freud becomes abstract. Everything is symbol. Everything is archetype. There's no acknowledgement of the messy, embodied, instinctual reality of being human. You need both. You need to acknowledge the animal, the drives, the impulses, the biology that doesn't care about your spiritual aspirations. And you need to honor the seeker, the part that demands meaning, that creates myths, that refuses to live as just an organism. Understanding the dark mind means recognizing it's not just one thing you're hiding from. It's the parts of you that society can't tolerate, and the parts of you that you haven't yet become. It's repressed instinct. and rejected potential. It's the beast and the god. Freud and Jung couldn't reconcile this. Their friendship shattered because neither could admit the other had part of the truth. But you don't have to make that mistake. You can look at your darkness through both lenses. Ask Freud's question, what am I repressing? What forbidden desire or aggressive impulse am I refusing to acknowledge? Then ask Jung's question, what am I rejecting? What unlived life, what potential self, what meaningful path have I abandoned? Both answers matter, because the darkness isn't your enemy. It's your teacher. It's showing you what you've buried, what you've denied, what you've refused to integrate. And integration, not repression, not denial, not transcendence, is how you become whole. Freud died believing Jung betrayed him. Jung died believing Freud couldn't see beyond biology. Both were brilliant. Both were limited. And the real tragedy isn't that they disagreed. It's that they couldn't see they were describing different dimensions of the same darkness. The darkness you carry isn't simple. It's animal and angel, instinct and meaning. The beast you won't admit, and the God you haven't met yet. Understanding it requires both men, the analyst and the mystic, the scientist and the storyteller. Freud and Jung, not enemies, complementary maps of the same hidden territory, the dark mind you're finally ready to explore.